Dan Bongino approached the microphone today and stated he would demonstrate that the listener was the greatest deception in the history of Congress. He spoke with a level voice, as though he were merely announcing the weather, or a basic reality that everyone present would soon have to acknowledge. The hearing room of the House Oversight Committee became completely silent, as every lens, journalist, and employee remained perfectly still. Subsequently, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez let out a laugh that was clearly staged rather than a sign of genuine nervousness. It was the sort of practiced reaction she had refined in front of mirrors to imply that this man was beneath her status. That specific laughter was designed to function perfectly as a short clip for her social media followers on Instagram. She moved closer to her own microphone while her expensive blazer, costing $3,000, caught the studio lights just right. Her assistants had selected that particular garment specifically for the visual impact it would have on the television cameras. They had dedicated 45 minutes to her makeup that morning because this was intended to be her defining moment. She expected to create another viral video of herself successfully humiliating a witness from the Republican Party. She mocked the idea of a former officer-turned-podcaster attempting to lecture her regarding the nature of fraudulent activity. Pausing for dramatic effect, she scanned the room with a look of theatrical disbelief to emphasize her point. She asked sarcastically if he intended to sell her gold coins or perhaps some survival rations for the end of the world. Her remarks drew scattered laughter from the Democratic representatives, while several staffers prepared their phones to record the encounter. She was completely in her element because this performance was the core of her public identity. She was widely known as the social media warrior and the representative of a specific young generation. She suggested that he should return to shouting into a microphone for the benefit of angry older listeners. She continued by telling him to leave actual legislative work to individuals who truly comprehended public policy. More laughter followed her comment, while one staff member gave her a visible signal of approval. Bongino did not move at all, but sat with his hands folded, watching her act with professional patience. He possessed the calm of a man who had served 12 years within the ranks of the Secret Service. He had spent his career protecting world leaders and facing actual threats, so he knew how to wait. Eventually, the laughter died out, and the heavy silence returned to the hearing room. Ocasio-Cortez's confident expression wavered briefly because she was not accustomed to an opponent who offered no reaction. She relied on the reactions of others to fuel her performance and needed them to continue her narrative. Bongino asked if she was finished in a voice that remained entirely flat and unimpressed by her display. She replied that she was just getting started and called him the personification of everything wrong with the country. Bongino reached down to open a briefcase that looked worn and practical rather than flashy or expensive. He stated that he was also just beginning while pulling out a single unremarkable folder. It was a simple manila folder with a typed label on the front that he placed on the table. He positioned the document so that every camera in the room could clearly read the words on the label. The label identified Ocasio-Cortez as a fraud, which caused an immediate stir and whispering throughout the gallery. Bongino mentioned the sum of $47 million and allowed the figure to linger in the air for a moment. He did not rush his delivery but gave the words space so the audience could fully process them. He claimed that this was the amount of money that had moved through her network of companies over 4 years. This money came from individuals who genuinely believed in her message and her political mission. He opened the folder and asserted that he knew the location of every single dollar and every lie told. He looked directly at her with steady and certain eyes as he spoke to the entire audience. He stated that by the time he finished, everyone watching would also understand the full extent of the situation. Pulling out the first document, he suggested that she should have remained a bartender, because that was an honest job. The Congresswoman opened her mouth to provide a sharp retort, but for once, no words actually came out. For the first time in her career as a politician, she found herself with absolutely nothing to say to the public. Bongino was only getting started as he turned to the very first section of his detailed folder. He moved with the methodical precision of someone who had built legal cases against international drug cartels. Every movement he made was deliberate, and every pause was calculated to maintain the tension in the room. He suggested they start with something basic and began to discuss the way she chose to live her life. Ocasio-Cortez rolled her eyes with a practiced air of dismissal as she complained about a right-wing obsession with her. He clarified that he was not interested in her clothing, but rather in the choices she made as a representative. He pointed out the massive gap between what she preached to the public and how she actually lived. He produced a lease agreement to demonstrate the point he was making about her personal living arrangements. He noted that she frequently spoke about affordable housing being a fundamental human right for every family. She claimed that working people were being crushed by high rents and forced out of their own neighborhoods. He then placed the lease for her luxury apartment in the Navy Yard area of Washington on the table. This residence cost $3,500 every month and featured high-end amenities like a rooftop pool and a fitness center. He looked up at her and stated that her rent was higher than the total income of most families. The families in her district often did not even earn that much money while working multiple difficult jobs. The cameras captured the moment her posture shifted slightly, even though she tried to remain composed. She argued that such prices were standard for housing in the capital and that members of Congress needed 2 homes. Bongino immediately produced another document, which consisted of a spreadsheet with many rows highlighted for emphasis. He presented a list of available apartments within 2 miles of the Capitol building that were much cheaper. There were plenty of modest options for less than half the price of her current luxury residence. He set the list down and argued that she chose the luxury building over the places where working people live. He noted that her home had amenities her constituents would never experience while costing more than their 6-week wages. He paused to clarify that while success is fine, building a brand on denying others what you enjoy is wrong. Her lawyer whispered something to her, but she waved him away with a gesture of visible irritation. Bongino moved to the next exhibit to discuss her signature legislation known as the Green New Deal. He pulled out a thick document and reminded her of her claims that climate change was an existential threat. She had previously stated that the world had only 12 years to act before facing a total catastrophe. He then produced a spreadsheet, revealing that she had taken 66 flights over the course of a single year. According to official records, every one of those flights was booked in either first class or business class. The room reacted as he noted her personal carbon footprint from air travel alone was massive. He claimed it was larger than the combined footprint of 20 average American families in a single year. He set the data down and pointed out the hypocrisy of asking others to give up cars and meat. He looked at her and remarked that first class must certainly be more comfortable than coach. She grabbed her microphone and insisted that those flights were for official business rather than personal travel. Bongino then pulled out a photograph and held it up for all the cameras to see clearly. It was an image from Miami Beach in early 2021, when the state of Texas was suffering through a freeze. The photo showed her in a bikini, holding a champagne glass at a luxury beach cabana. He pointed out that she flew to Florida for a fundraiser at a mansion while people were dying. He noted that her own constituents were also dealing with winter weather emergencies back in New York. He explained that the image had been deleted quickly from social media, but nothing ever truly vanishes from the internet. He produced another image showing her back in New York, 2 days later, tweeting about climate justice. He looked at her with pity and remarked that the champagne on the beach must have been quite nice. Her face turned red with anger as she claimed the trip was a previously scheduled event. Bongino interrupted her because he was interested in building his case rather than hearing her excuses. He noted her public support for defunding the police and her claims that communities do not need armed officers. She had argued that money should be diverted from law enforcement to social services and mental health programs. He then spread out documents revealing her personal security expenses over the last 2 years of her term. These financial disclosures showed that she had spent over $70,000 on private armed protection for herself. He looked at her and pointed out that she used professionals with guns while telling mothers they didn't need police. She tried to defend herself by mentioning credible death threats she had received against her life. Bongino countered by stating that the people in her district also face real threats every single day. He mentioned mothers working night shifts and children walking through dangerous gang territory to get to school. He paused to highlight that the difference was those people could not afford $70,000 for private security. He argued that she wanted to take away the only protection those vulnerable people actually had available. The room became silent once more, as even the sound of typing from the reporters stopped. Bongino then pulled out a set of documents regarding the people who actually worked in her office. He read from official filings containing anonymous complaints submitted to the Office of Congressional Ethics. These documents alleged that she demanded total loyalty but treated her staff like personal servants. One quote claimed that unpaid overtime was expected and complaints were met with threats against their careers. Another complaint stated that she preached about workers' rights while running her own office like a sweatshop. It was alleged that interns worked full hours without any pay while she gave speeches about living wages. A different page claimed there were 2 versions of her, the public hero and the private bully. He set the papers down and remarked that the champion of the working class lacked basic human decency. Her voice cracked as she claimed the accusations were from disgruntled people and had not been proven. Bongino reminded her that these were sworn statements filed under penalty of perjury by her own believers. He closed that section and noted that being a hypocrite was merely pathetic rather than a crime. He opened a new section of the folder where the pages were thicker and more dense. He explained that this was where the discussion would shift to the actual crimes committed. He understood how to build tension and stated that this section would end political careers. He returned to the $47 million that had moved through her political network over the span of 4 years. He produced a complex diagram with arrows showing how money flowed between various organizations like a web. He named 3 specific organizations connected to her that moved money in a way that would impress a money launderer. She attempted a dismissive laugh and claimed those were legitimate organizations supporting progressive candidates. Bongino offered to walk everyone through the process step by step so the public could understand. He pointed out that donations came from small donors who believed her message about fighting corruption. These working people gave what they could afford, even if it meant skipping meals to donate. He traced a line on the chart showing how that money was paid to a private company for services. This private company then paid another consulting firm that was controlled by her former chief of staff. Bongino revealed that her chief of staff was the same man who had originally recruited her at a casting call. The money traveled in a circle from political committees to private firms and back to her inner circle. Along the way, millions of dollars disappeared into vague categories like consulting fees and operating expenses. He pulled out records showing over $1 million in payments that could not be properly accounted for at all. The documentation for these services was missing or undefined, suggesting the money had simply vanished. He mentioned that the FEC had been investigating these arrangements for years, but was stuck in a partisan deadlock. He noted that the FBI did not have that problem and had been looking into the matter very carefully. Her attorney looked pale as he wrote notes frantically on his legal pad during the testimony. Bongino then shifted the focus to something more personal by bringing up her longtime partner. He described her boyfriend as a nice enough man, but one with no background in political strategy. He produced records showing the campaign had paid him $6,000 every month for marketing consulting. He calculated that this totaled more than $72,000 in donor money paid for a service he didn't seem to provide. He asked what marketing strategies or deliverables actually existed with her boyfriend's name on them. After a long silence, he answered for her by stating that there was no evidence he did any work. There was no portfolio of work, only checks written from funds donated by people who supported a movement. She rose to defend him, claiming he provided valuable digital strategy to the campaign team. Bongino challenged her to show the committee a single piece of work he had actually produced. He noted that his name appeared only on payment records and never on any actual work product. He then introduced the story of Maria Gonzalez, a single mother living in the Congresswoman's district. Maria worked 2 jobs, cleaning buildings and folding laundry, to make a living for her 2 children. She earned about $14 an hour, with no benefits or vacation time to speak of. In 2018, Maria had donated $50 to the campaign, which represented a full day of her wages. She had skipped buying groceries that week because she believed in the person she saw on television. Bongino pointed out that Maria's $50 helped pay for her boyfriend's lifestyle while he produced nothing for the cause. He noted the tragedy of a mother skipping meals so her children could eat, while her money went to her. The Congresswoman blinked rapidly, as her eyes filled with tears during this portion of the hearing. She claimed it was a gross mischaracterization of campaign finance, but Bongino produced an email from her personal account. The email instructed her chief of staff to make sure transfers did not look connected to avoid donor scrutiny. He argued that this was not an accounting error, but a direct instruction to hide the destination of the funds. He pointed out the discomfort of other committee members as he described the betrayal of thousands of donors. He stated that the money was funding her inner circle and her personal lifestyle, rather than a revolution. He revealed that $4.2 million of donor money went directly to entities controlled by her or her associates. He closed that section and explained that not all the money had come from American sources. He opened a new section of the folder to discuss the famous photograph taken at the border fence. He noted how that image of her crying had transformed her into a national icon almost overnight. It had been shared millions of times and used to launch her political career to new heights. He paused to reveal a problem with that narrative by showing photos taken minutes before and after the shot. These images showed her laughing with staff and checking her makeup in her phone screen. Her grief appeared to last only 5 minutes, just long enough for the photographers to get what they needed. She shook her head and insisted the photos were out of context and her emotions were genuine. Bongino then read a text from her communications director about manufacturing the emotion shot with tissues. He read another text from her about capitalizing on the viral photo for fundraising before the news cycle moved on. He pointed out that the suffering of the children at the border was real, while she used them as props. She claimed to care deeply and to have fought tirelessly for immigration reform during her time in office. Bongino then showed her schedule for the 2 years following the photo, revealing she never returned to a facility. He noted she found time for hundreds of media interviews, but zero substantive legislative work. He mentioned her inflammatory language about concentration camps and Nazi guards, which generated donations, but also danger. He read a report about border agents being assaulted by protesters who were motivated by her specific rhetoric. One agent was hospitalized with severe injuries, while she got the headlines she wanted for her brand. He noted that her legislative record consisted only of symbolic gestures rather than actual laws that helped families. He then pointed to donations from open border groups that were under investigation for concerning financial connections. She slammed her hand on the table and called his insinuations racist, but he produced a government report. He asked if she had done any due diligence on where her campaign money was actually coming from. He argued that she profited from the chaos at the border and built her brand on suffering. He closed that section and stated that what she really thought of her voters was even worse. He warned the audience that the next part would be painful for those who believed in her. He brought up the 2019 Amazon headquarters deal that was planned for her district in Long Island City. It would have brought 25,000 high-paying jobs and billions of dollars in investment to her local community. She had led the opposition, calling it corporate welfare and a giveaway to a billionaire. Because of her efforts, Amazon withdrew the offer and took those opportunities to a different community. He then read an email where she admitted to a donor that keeping voters poor made them more reliable. He argued that she killed those jobs because financially secure voters would no longer need her political programs. She was shaking as she claimed the email was being taken out of context by her opponents. Bongino then pulled out phone records containing private text messages to a friend from her college days. In these messages, she allegedly called the people of the Bronx easy to manipulate with a few Spanish phrases. She also reportedly claimed they were not smart enough to realize they were being played by her. Another text suggested she would never actually live in the Bronx again and viewed it merely as a brand. He set the records down and stated these were her private thoughts when she felt safe from public view. She whispered that she was just venting, but he asked what context could make those insults acceptable. He pointed out that her staff consisted mostly of Ivy League graduates from out of state rather than locals. He noted that her Hispanic outreach coordinator was from a wealthy suburb and did not speak fluent Spanish. He argued that she gave no chance to local kids who actually knew the community she claimed to represent. He then brought up her heritage and a linguistic analysis of her intermediate level of Spanish. He argued that she performed her identity for the cameras but lacked an actual connection to the culture. She began to cry and called it a racist attack, but he noted it was an observation about her. He pointed out that she actually grew up in a wealthy suburb with a high median income. He argued that she appropriated a story of struggle because it sold better to the voters and won elections. He closed the folder and labeled her entire career as a simple case of fraud against the working class. The room felt different, as the polished warrior was replaced by a woman who looked smaller and broken. She demanded the right to respond to the accusations as the chairman allowed her to make a statement. She called the hearing a political witch hunt by forces who were terrified of strong progressive women. She claimed the evidence was twisted to silence the voice of the working people she represented in Washington. She insisted she would not be intimidated and called Bongino a failed cop and a conspiracy theorist. Bongino then reached back into his briefcase to produce a cooperation agreement from her former chief of staff. He revealed that the man who built her operation had been talking to federal investigators for 6 months. He also mentioned that her boyfriend had been interviewed by the FBI regarding his suspicious campaign payments. He noted that former staff members had given sworn statements about the abuse and threats they faced in her office. She turned to her colleagues for support, but they remained silent and refused to even look at her. Bongino pointed out that they had already released statements distancing themselves from her to save their own careers. One colleague claimed no knowledge of her finances, while another unfollowed her on all social media platforms. She realized she was utterly alone in the room as the cameras captured every moment of her collapse. She whispered that it wasn't fair, and that she was only trying to make a difference in the world. Bongino replied that she probably believed that once, but then she started thinking the rules did not apply to her. He suggested she got lost between her viral success and the power she gained at a young age. He stood up and noted that his sympathy did not undo the damage she had caused to others. The chairman then announced a formal referral to the Department of Justice for a criminal investigation into her. The hearing adjourned with a sharp crack of the gavel as she struggled to stand on her own. She pushed her staff away and tried to walk out through a storm of blinding camera flashes and questions. Reporters shouted about her resignation and the federal investigation as the door closed behind her career. The news spread instantly, and within hours, members of her own party were calling for her to resign. In the Bronx, Maria Gonzalez watched the fuzzy television screen and held her old donation receipt in her hand. Maria told a reporter that she had used the congresswoman as an example for her daughters to follow. She felt that more than the money, it was the hope for the future that had been stolen. Similar scenes of disillusionment played out in diners and laundromats across the district as people watched the news. Bongino did only one interview where he expressed sympathy for the gifts she had wasted through her choices. He returned to his home office and filed the folder away, knowing the work would continue tomorrow. He reflected on the pattern of politicians trading their principles for power and the comfort of the elite. 3 days later, she submitted her resignation from Congress in a brief letter that admitted no wrongdoing. While the investigations continued, life in the Bronx went on and Maria went back to her daily work. She took the old campaign poster down from her wall and put it in the trash. She knew that once trust is broken in such a way, it can never truly be repaired.